Hello, everyone. Tonight we will be sitting in a room that's a little too still. The kind of stillness you feel more than you hear. There's a clock on the wall. Old. Wooden. The kind that ticks like it has something to say. Each second echoes louder when you're the only one listening. Outside, a street lamp flickers. Not broken. Just tired. Like someone who's stayed up too long waiting for an answer that never came. My tea's gone cold, but I'm still holding the cup, because sometimes that's all you can hold. And in that moment, between one breath and the next, you realize this isn't just a quiet night, it's the night. The night you finally let the truth out, because I didn't plan for this, didn't want to tell this story, but silence has a weight. And I'm done carrying it. It started with something small. So small it shouldn't have mattered. A wedding invitation from my sister. I said no, not because I was cruel, not because I was jealous. I said no, because for once I chose me. And that's when everything fell apart. My family, my future, my inheritance, all. Because I wouldn't show up for a day that was never really about love. So before we get any deeper, if stories like this matter to you, if you want to hear more truths whispered in the dark, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really, truly want to be here. Also, tell me where you're watching from. What time is it? What's around you right now? I read it all. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music. And let's begin. I used to think childhood was supposed to be fair. That if you were good, quiet, helpful, polite, you'd be loved equally. But that wasn't my story, not in our house, not with my sister. She was the sun, bright, loud, dramatic in a way people adored. When she walked into a room, everything shifted to orbit around her. And me? I was the backdrop, the one who set the table, cleaned up the mess, got straight A's, but never the applause. She could skip curfew and get a hug. I could come home early and still get questioned. There was a moment, I must have been 10, when I handed Mom a drawing I'd made for her birthday. She looked at it, smiled politely, then set it down and said, "Did you see the dance your sister choreographed?" It was amazing. That was the first time I felt it. That tug. That small, quiet ache in your chest. It says, you don't matter as much. Over time, that ache becomes a rhythm, a quiet soundtrack to your life. It plays when she gets your share of dessert, when she gets away with skipping chores, when you realize even your wins aren't wins unless they're hers too. But I didn't resent her. Not then. Because children don't know how to name injustice. They just learn how to work around it, how to please, how to disappear, how to survive. And so I did. I stayed quiet, did what I was told, let her shine, even when it burned. Even when it meant giving up pieces of myself I didn't know I'd miss later. Because the dream was simple. If I just waited long enough, if I just proved myself enough, they'd see me. They'd love me like they loved her. But sometimes, the people you want to impress the most are the ones least willing to change their view of you. And when the time came, when the moment finally arrived where I could say no to that same cycle, I took it. And they punished me for it. But that punishment didn't start with the will. It started a long time ago, with every time I was asked to step aside, and I said nothing. She didn't even tell me in person. The engagement. I found out from a photo, a sparkly ring, a champagne glass, and a caption that read, "He asked." I said yes. That was it. No text, no call, just an Instagram post, buried between a selfie and a sale ad. I stared at it for longer than I want to admit. Not because I was shocked she was getting married, but because she hadn't told me. And somehow, I was still surprised. A few hours later, Mom called. Her voice was high-pitched, fluttery, fake happy. "Isn't it wonderful?" she asked. "She's finally settling down with someone successful." I asked how long they'd been dating. There was a pause. Then, "Well, it's been a whirlwind. 6 months." 6 months. And yet, she was already in a dress shop by the end of the week, already tasting cakes, picking colors, booking a venue that cost more than my yearly salary. It was all moving so fast, like a train she dared anyone to stop. And me? I stood on the platform, watching, wondering if anyone else saw what I saw, because something felt off. He barely spoke when I met him, smiled, but never with his eyes, talked over her like she was a stage, not a partner. But no one noticed. Or maybe they didn't want to, because my sister was glowing, and people love a glow, even if it comes from a fire. Still, I tried. I asked her questions, gently, privately. You sure about this? Do you feel safe with him? Do you even know him? She brushed me off, laughed like I was being dramatic. You're jealous, she said, as always. And that cut deep, because it wasn't jealousy, it was fear, a quiet, gnawing fear I couldn't name yet, but felt in my bones. Still, I didn't argue, didn't fight. I just stepped back, watched the circus unfold, and waited. Waited for the moment when I'd be invited, not just to the wedding, but into the charade they all seemed so eager to perform. What I didn't know was that the invitation wouldn't come with love. It would come with strings. And a silent threat. It arrived in the mail, not by hand, not in a phone call, but in a pale pink envelope with gold foil lettering, like sugar coating over something sour. Inside was the invitation, lace-trimmed, heavy cardstock, perfumed. It said everything and nothing. There was no handwritten note, no, can't wait to see you, no, it wouldn't be the same without you, just my name and a date, a place, and a seat assignment far from the head table. It felt more like a summons than an invitation, like a command dressed in florals and formality. And when I flipped it over, I noticed something else. An RSVP deadline, already passed. That was the message. It wasn't about including me. It was about appearances, about checking a box, about pretending that everything was fine, even though we all knew it wasn't. I sat with that envelope for 3 days, moved it from the counter to the fridge, then from the fridge to the trash, then back again. It felt like holding a bomb wrapped in ribbon. And eventually, I made my choice. I wrote her a letter, not a text, not a public comment, just a letter, 1 page, simple, respectful, but honest. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't support something that didn't feel safe or real, that I didn't want to pretend for pictures, didn't want to clap on cue, didn't want to be the quiet sister in the background again. I hit send and braced for the storm. It didn't take long. First it was Mom, then Dad, then the aunts, the cousins, the friends of friends I hadn't spoken to in years. They called me bitter, said I was ruining the happiest day of her life, said I was selfish. But no one, not one person, asked me why. No one asked what I saw, what I felt, what made me choose not to go. They only saw the headline, Sister Skip's wedding. They never read the fine print. And I think that hurt the most. Not being misunderstood, but being deliberately misunderstood, because it was easier for them to paint me as the villain than to look too closely at the fairy tale they wanted so badly to believe in. There's a kind of silence that isn't quiet. It hums, like a refrigerator in the middle of the night, like a question that never gets answered. That's what it felt like after I said no. That strange, buzzing stillness, right before the phone starts to ring. And ring it did. My mother first, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. "How dare you?" she snapped. "She's your sister." I tried to explain. I really did. But every word I offered, she caught it midair and threw it back at me. "You're overreacting. You're jealous. You just want attention." That last one made me pause, because that wasn't true. I had never been the one to want attention. I was the one who dimmed herself so others could shine. The one who stayed quiet, polite, predictable. But when I finally stepped out of line, when I dared to say no to the script, they couldn't stand it. Then came the voicemails, one from Dad. His voice was tired, like he didn't want to be in the middle, but had chosen his side anyway. "It's just one day," he said. "One day to keep the peace." As if peace had ever belonged to me. As if my discomfort, my truth, wasn't worth the same effort. Then the text came flooding in. From people I barely knew. All echoing the same tune. "She's devastated. You broke her heart. You could have just come for the pictures." Like I was a prop, a placeholder, something to balance the bridal party aesthetic. And you know what hurt most? Not that they were mad, but that none of them thought to ask me how I was. Not one. They didn't ask about my fears, or what I'd noticed about her fiancé, or why I couldn't sit through a ceremony that felt more like a performance than a promise. They just needed a scapegoat, and I made it easy. I said no, and suddenly I was everything they said I was. Cold, cruel, unforgivable. But deep down, I held on to one truth. I had chosen me, for once. And even if it burned, I wasn't going to apologize for setting a boundary I should have set years ago. I didn't expect applause. But I didn't expect exile either. The silence stretched. Days, then weeks, then holidays. My phone sat still. Notifications silent. No texts, no Merry Christmas, no Happy Birthday, just nothing. It's funny how you don't notice the rhythm of a family until it stops. There were no more Sunday check-ins, no shared photos of babies or new recipes, no casual updates about the weather or Aunt Linda's gout. They shut the door. And this time, they didn't just lock it. They welded it shut. I tried once, just once, to call Mom. She picked up. Her voice was clipped, formal, like she was talking to a stranger in a waiting room. I asked how she was. She said, "Fine." I asked if Dad was okay. She said, "Yes." I asked if we could talk, really talk. She paused, then said, "Your sister's very hurt." That was it. No, "How are you doing?" No, "Let's try to understand each other." Just, "She's hurt." As if that was the only pain that mattered. As if the rest of us didn't bleed in silence. After that, I stopped reaching out. Not because I stopped caring, but because it became clear. I was the outsider now, not by accident, by design. I saw the family group photos online. Thanksgiving, Easter, a random Thursday brunch. Everyone smiling, everyone together. My absence wasn't mourned, it was erased. They didn't talk about me, didn't ask about me. I became a ghost, alive, but unwelcome. And maybe, just maybe, that's when I started mourning them too. Not who they were, but who I had hoped they could be. The family I kept trying to earn. The love I thought would come if I just stayed small enough, quiet enough. But when you disappear from their lives, and they don't come looking, that's not family, that's performance. And the stage lights had finally gone out. The envelope was cream-colored. No return address, just my name, in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. I knew who it was from before I opened it. My mother always wrote in cursive, looped letters that somehow made even coldness look elegant. Inside was a letter, 2 paragraphs, formal, distant, like a business memo dipped in perfume. It said the will had been updated, that everything was being passed down to my sister. The house, the accounts, the jewelry, the land our grandparents had owned for generations. No explanation, no apology, just a quiet, brutal line near the end. Given recent events, this decision reflects our family values. I read it twice, then a third time, and still couldn't believe it, because it wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the things. It was about being erased, officially, permanently, like I hadn't spent years sitting by my father's hospital bed, like I hadn't driven Mom to her specialist appointments every other week, like I hadn't been the one to organize their 40th anniversary party when my sister was too busy planning a yoga retreat. It was like none of it mattered, like I was never meant to matter. I sat on the floor, letter in hand, as the sunlight shifted across the room. That dull, late afternoon kind of light that makes shadows look longer than they are. And I thought, this is what it feels like to be disowned. Not in anger, but in silence, in paperwork, in ink that can't be erased. I didn't cry right away. That came later, after dinner, after dishes, after brushing my teeth like it was a normal night. It hit me when I reached for the bedside lamp and realized no one would ever call to say I'd been thought of, that my name wasn't on any list, that I didn't exist in their future, not even in memory. And the worst part? A part of me still hoped the next letter would say it was all a mistake. But it wasn't. It was real, and it was just the beginning. I told myself I wouldn't go, wouldn't show up, wouldn't knock on their door, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. But some pain sits heavy in the chest, too heavy to carry in silence. So I drove. 3 hours, no music, no stops. Just the hum of the tires and the steady ache of disbelief. Their house looked the same. Blue shutters. Hydrangeas Mom trimmed every spring. The wind chimes still dancing by the porch. The one I bought her 5 birthdays ago. I almost turned back, but something in me needed to see. Not the house. Them. I knocked. 3 times. Dad opened the door. He looked older, not in the usual way, but in the, I've learned how to live without you kind of way. We stood there, 2 people who shared blood, but not much else anymore. He didn't invite me in, just stepped aside. Your mother's resting, he said. I stepped into the hallway. Everything was familiar, and nothing was safe. Family portraits stared at me from the wall, all updated, all complete without me. And then she walked in. My sister, perfect hair, glossy smile, a baby bump I hadn't known about, pregnant. I blinked. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at me like I was the mailman with bad news. And then Mom appeared, pale, thin, wrapped in a cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was empty. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter, held it out, trembling slightly. "This," I said. "I need to understand it." She looked at it, didn't take it, then said, "It's already done. No apology, no reasoning, just finality. The decision was made as a family." I wanted to scream, to list every sacrifice, every hour, every ache I swallowed for them. But I didn't, because I saw it clearly then. This wasn't about justice. It wasn't even about her wedding. It was about power, and I had stepped out of line. The will wasn't a punishment. It was a warning to never question the script again. And I, the quiet daughter, the helpful one, the good soldier, I had finally broken character. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't shout, didn't cry. I just walked down the front steps like someone leaving a funeral that had already happened years ago. Because in a way, it had. The funeral wasn't for a person. It was for an idea. The idea that maybe, if I tried hard enough, I'd be chosen. That love was something I could earn. That if I played my role perfectly, quiet, selfless, invisible, they'd finally see me. But they didn't. They saw what they wanted to see. A daughter who was inconvenient. A sister who said no. A woman who refused to play along. And for that, I was cut. I drove home through the dark. No stars that night. Just long stretches of highway and the occasional flicker of headlights in the other lane. I didn't turn on the radio. Just let the silence stretch, like skin pulled too tight over something tender. That's when I remembered something, a story my grandfather once told me, back when I was a kid. He said, "Sometimes people only love the version of you that doesn't challenge them." At the time, I didn't understand. Now I do. They didn't disown me for what I did. They disowned me for who I stopped pretending to be. Because when I said no to that wedding, when I refused to stand beside someone I didn't trust, in a dress I didn't choose, for a photo I didn't believe in, I broke the illusion. And they couldn't forgive that. They couldn't forgive me. Weeks passed after that visit. No follow-up, no call, no change of heart. The silence wasn't temporary. It was structural, strategic. sewn into the fabric of who they'd chosen to become. A family built on performance, where loyalty was only rewarded if it came with compliance, and love was conditional. Always was. I had just been too busy hoping to notice. Sometimes the truth shows up wearing someone else's voice. In my case, it was Mrs. Delaney. She used to be my parents' neighbor, lived 3 doors down, retired nurse, baked too much, talked too much. She was the kind of person who always just happened to know things. And one morning, weeks after the will, after the visit, after the silence had settled in, I got an email from her. Subject line, "You didn't deserve that." That's all it took. My heart kicked up. I clicked it open. Inside, she wrote, "I know it's not my place, but I was there the night they made the decision. I overheard them talking. You need to know, it wasn't about the wedding. Not really. She said my sister had pushed for the will to be changed before the wedding even happened. That she'd told my parents, she's always been distant. You can't trust someone who doesn't support you. And Mom, always craving harmony, even if it was fake, had agreed. Dad didn't fight it. Not because he believed it, but because he was tired. Let's just make it simple, he said. She doesn't seem to want to be part of this family anymore. Mrs. Delaney said she nearly interrupted them, nearly stood up and said something, but she didn't. Because she thought, surely they won't go through with it. But they did. She ended the email by saying, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up. But I see you. I've always seen you." I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Not because of the betrayal. That wound had already formed. But because someone finally acknowledged it. Finally said, "You weren't crazy. You weren't dramatic. You were right to feel hurt." It was the kind of validation I hadn't realized I'd needed so badly. And even though it didn't change the will, or bring back my parents, or repair what was broken, it mattered. Because the truth matters. Even whispered, even late, even through the voice of someone who once brought you leftover banana bread in a napkin. Sometimes the smallest truths shine a light into the darkest corners. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. You'd be surprised how quickly a lawyer can drain your hope. His office smelled like old paper and disappointment. Books everywhere, certificates on the wall, and a little sign on the desk that said, "Don't confuse Google with my law degree." I slid the letter across the table, explained everything, the will, the update, the silence. He nodded as I spoke, occasionally scribbling notes in the margin of a yellow legal pad. When I was done, he leaned back. "You want the short version?" he asked. I nodded. "You're out." Just like that. I blinked. He explained that everything had been done by the book. Witnesses, signatures, no coercion they could prove, no loopholes they could leverage. I asked, "What if I contest it?" He tilted his head. "You could try, but unless you've got hard evidence, all you'll do is burn bridges that are already halfway to ash." That one hurt. But he wasn't wrong. The will wasn't just a legal document. It was a message, a final line in the family's script, with no role left for me. I left the office feeling numb, not angry, not even sad, just tired. Because when you fight for something for so long, only to find out the battle ended without you, there's no victory, only air, empty, still, heavy in a different way. I sat in my car for a while, watching the world go by, people laughing on the sidewalk, kids running with melting ice cream, the kind of life that keeps moving, even when yours has stopped. And I realized I wasn't just grieving the money, the inheritance, the house, or the heirlooms. I was grieving the story I thought I was part of. The story where good daughters are loved, where sacrifices are rewarded, where showing up quietly still counts for something. But that story was fiction, and I wasn't going to waste one more chapter pretending it was real. I waited a long time before reaching out to her. My sister, the woman who smiled through every photo while my name was being scratched off the future. I needed space, not to heal, because healing hadn't started yet. I needed space to not break. But one morning, I woke up, made tea, and without planning to, I picked up my phone and typed, "I know what you did. That's all. No hello, no context. Just the truth, like a stone dropped in still water." She responded 5 minutes later. It was longer than I expected. Structured, polished. A message that had clearly been waiting in drafts for a while. She wrote, "You made your choice when you said no to my wedding. Family means showing up. You didn't. So don't act surprised when you're not included now." I stared at the words. Family means showing up. That phrase stuck with me, because I had shown up. Every year, every crisis, every birthday, even when I wasn't invited. Every hospital run, every exam week meltdown, every time she needed to be bailed out of her own decisions, I showed up. But the one time I didn't clap on cue, the one time I didn't attend the performance, suddenly, I wasn't family anymore. I took a breath and wrote back, "No, family means listening. It means asking. It means seeing people even when they stop playing the roles you assign them." She didn't reply. Not then, not later, not ever. And maybe that was the answer I needed all along, because silence tells you who's still writing your name in pencil, who's waiting to erase you the moment you stop being convenient. I stopped checking her socials after that. No more photos, no more curated happiness, no more pretending that what she had was something I'd lost, because I hadn't lost a sister. I'd lost the illusion of one, and there's grief in that, but also a strange kind of relief, like waking up from a dream that never quite felt right. I didn't rebuild my life out of spite. That would have been too easy, too loud. No, I rebuilt it in whispers, the quiet kind of work you do when no one's watching. It started small, a shelf I put up myself, a rug I bought secondhand, just because it made the room feel warmer. Then came the garden. Just a few herbs at first, basil, mint, rosemary in a chipped clay pot. Something about watching things grow, things I watered, cared for, spoke to when no one was around, made me feel alive again, not for them, not for applause, but for me. I took long walks with no destination, started journaling, not the pretty kind with gold-trimmed pages, but messy spiral notebooks filled with half-thoughts and honesty. I cooked meals that only I would eat, lit candles for no reason, laughed at things no one else heard. It was the first time in my life I didn't feel like I was performing, didn't feel like I was waiting to be picked. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it was mine. And as time passed, I started to see something I never had before. I had been the good daughter, the helper, the background noise, the one who sacrificed first and spoke last. But that version of me, she wasn't loved for who she was. She was tolerated for who she pretended to be. And I was done pretending. I didn't chase apologies, didn't look for validation in the rearview mirror. I just lived, fully, softly. And somehow that was louder than anything I'd ever said before. People say revenge is sweet, but I think peace is sweeter. Because revenge is loud, messy, hungry. But peace? Peace is quiet, and it never asks for permission. It came in the fall, one of those golden October mornings when the air smells like dried leaves and old memories. A letter. No handwriting this time. Typed. Formal. From a lawyer's office I didn't recognize. For a moment, my stomach twisted. The kind of twist that comes when you've trained yourself to expect bad news. But I opened it anyway. Inside was a single-page notice. An inheritance. From my great-aunt Miriam. She wasn't someone I knew well. She lived in a different state, sent birthday cards with shaky cursive, and always included $2 bills. We'd met maybe 5 times. But apparently, she'd been paying attention. In the letter, the attorney explained that Aunt Miriam had made changes to her will before she passed. She'd left me a small cabin in the woods, books, journals, and a note. It was handwritten, unsteady, but clear. "I always admired your quiet. Some people think silence is weakness, but I saw you listening, saw you choosing, and I want you to have a place where no one tells you who to be." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I laughed. a breathy, broken kind of laugh, like something had finally cracked open inside me. Because even though she barely knew me, she saw me. And maybe that's what we're all looking for in the end. Not fortune, not power, not applause. Just to be seen. Not for who we pretend to be, but for who we are when we think no one's looking. I went to see the cabin a few weeks later. It wasn't much. Just a porch, 2 creaky steps, a fireplace that needed cleaning. But it was quiet. Honestly quiet. Not the kind filled with tension or loss. Just birds. Wind. The kind of quiet that doesn't judge. I brought my tea. A book. Sat on the floor in a sleeping bag. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. Not love. Not family. Not even justice. Just peace. And in that small moment, curled up beside a fire that crackled just enough, I realized this was more than I ever thought I'd get. And maybe it was exactly what I needed. There are stories we inherit, and stories we outgrow. For most of my life, I lived inside a story that wasn't mine. A quiet daughter, a supportive sister, someone who kept peace by swallowing her own voice. But then came the invitation. A wedding I couldn't attend. A choice that wasn't cruel, just honest. And the fallout that followed. It wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't about tradition, or family values, or one day to keep the peace. It was about control. About what happens when you stop bending. When you say, enough. When you finally write your own ending, no matter who decides to leave the room. They took the inheritance, the heirlooms, the stories they thought made them strong. But I took something they never expected me to claim. Myself. It was painful, yes. Lonely, absolutely. But it was also the beginning of everything I'd never been given permission to want. A home that doesn't ask for performance. A legacy built on truth, not guilt. And a life that's mine. Quiet, steady, real. Sometimes we think healing has to be loud, that it has to come with fireworks or apologies, or a grand moment of closure. But healing? It's quiet. It's making tea without expecting a phone call. It's planting things that grow even when no one watches. It's being okay with not being invited, because you've finally invited yourself into your own life. So if you've ever been cut out for choosing yourself, if you've ever said no and paid a price for it, let me tell you this. You didn't lose. You learned. You saw the truth. And that's something no one can write out of a will. Thank you for staying with me tonight. If this story made you feel seen, if it reminded you of your own turning point, or gave you a quiet kind of courage, I hope you'll like the video. Subscribe. Maybe leave a comment below, not for numbers. But so I know I'm not speaking into the void. So I know that somewhere out there, someone else is rewriting their story too. And until next time, slow your breath, loosen your shoulders. Let the silence hold you like a blanket, because you're safe now. You're home. Good night.